Hey guys, today I want to talk about 3 variations I make in my braking equipment to get the brake feel I want on my mountain bike. Basically, I like to have a lot of power in my front brake, but I like to have a lot of control in my rear brake. So when I'm coming downhill and I want to scrub off some speed, I want to be able to mash my rear brake fairly hard without locking up the brake where it will scrub off speed. I want to be able to pull the front brake and get it to apply a lot of power in a very short amount of time. To get that feel in my braking, there are 3 adjustments I typically make. Let's get into it. Now, the first item I want to talk about is the difference in the size of the brake rotor in the front and the back on the bike. Now, if you've done any mountain biking or looked at any mountain bikes in detail, you've probably noticed that the front rotor on many bikes is larger than the rear rotor. And the reason is that the front rotor, being larger, will provide more stopping power than the rear rotor. And what's happened is this is an indication that people want more of the braking power in the front of the bike versus the rear of the bike, which is exactly what I want on my bike. So as you can see on this bike, this front rotor is bigger than the rear rotor. So on the bike I just showed you, I'm taking a picture here of rotors similar to those on the bike, and I just want you to see that the front rotor is the rotor at the top, and it's 220 millimeters in diameter. The rotor in the bottom is 203 millimeters in diameter, and as you can see, the one in front is bigger than the one in the rear. And the larger rotor just gives you more braking power, and hence is going to give you a little bit stronger braking in the front of the bike. Here are 2 Intense Tazer e-bikes. These bikes are almost identical, except primarily for the second item I want to talk about, and that is differences in the rear caliper. Now, the gray bike on the left has a MT5 brake caliper, and this caliper has 4 pistons, and this is set up so that it has 4 brake pads, 1 per each piston. The bike on the right has an MT4 caliper, which is a 2-piston caliper, so that the 4-piston is a stronger caliper. Having the 4 pistons will allow you to have much more power applied to the rear brake. But the one on the back, the MT4, even though it has 2 calipers, the braking power is adequate, I've found, for its application, although not as strong as the MT5. The bike on the right has more control on the rear brake. I mean, on that particular bike, I can squeeze on the brake lever much harder before it will lock up the rear wheel, and as a result, the bike on the right will allow me to have more control over the rear wheel. However, it's important to note that for the bike on the right, it takes a lot more hand pressure to put the same amount of power down to that rear brake, and it takes longer just because you have more to go through in the lever when you're compressing it to get to the point where it will lock up the brakes. To summarize, a way to get more control over the rear brake is to have a rear caliper that is not as strong as the caliper on the front brake. And that's what you're seeing in the bike on the right, the yellow bike with the MT4. The third equipment consideration I make to get a trade-off between power and control are the actual brake pads. Now, what I'm showing here are some brake pads for a Magura MT4 brake, which are similar to the calipers I showed you on the yellow bike just a minute ago. What I found is the orange pads up top have more metal in them, although both of them are semi-metallic pads. The orange ones have more metal in them, and hence they will provide a more power in the braking than the silver pads. Now, if I'm at a downhill park, I probably would go with the orange pads just to get more power and more braking. But if I'm just out trail riding, I probably would opt for the silver pads because I don't need probably as much power as quickly, and I would want to have more of the control. Now let me show you what these pads look like up close so you can see the difference in the metal content of the pad. If you look at the two pads up close side by side, you can see that both of the pads have metallic in them, but the orange pad seems to have a lot more metal in it than the silver pads, and hence that's why those pads will provide more stopping power more quickly. There's just a more aggressive braking compound on those pads. Well, there you have it, guys. The three things I pay attention to get the brakes to feel the way I want it: rotor size, the type calipers, and the pad material. I hope I've given you something to think about, and I'll see you guys at the top.